All right, hang on. We're ready to go.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Keeping a Watchful Eye on Critical Infrastructure. My name is Tracy Davis and I will be moderating today's session. To ensure a smooth flow, all participants will be in listen-only mode. Please ask any questions you have throughout the presentation by utilizing the GoToWebinar sidebar on the right side of your screen. We'll address all questions at the end of the webinar. Our presenters today are Randall Kerr, Manager of Sales Engineering, and Deb Smith, Channel Account Manager. Randall has 27 years of professional experience in education, IT management, infrastructure, design and implementation, technical consulting, and sales engineering. Deb is our Channel Account Manager supporting Express Systems and has been with Digi for 24 years and counting. Randall, with that, I will turn the presentation over to you to get us started.
All right, great. Thanks, Tracy. Well, thanks everyone for attending today. Again, my name is Randall Kerr. I'm the Manager of Sales Engineering at Digi, which means that I cover a team that handles kind of all of the different product families that Digi manufactures. I personally specialize in our cellular technologies, and I work a great deal with Digi Remote Manager. So I was asked to give a talk today about a few things, just to kind of run through the general agenda of what we wanted to cover. I want to talk about the Digi ecosystem, so the types of hardware that we manufacture and kind of what is the glue that holds those products together and allows you to engage them, secure them, monitor them, and keep them running at peak efficiency. And that piece of the equation is Digi Remote Manager. So we'll talk about it. I'll give a brief live overview of that platform as well. I want to talk a little bit about how you get started with Digi Remote Manager. And then toward the end, I'm going to pass things back over to Deb Smith, who's going to talk a little bit about a special promotion that Digi has going on. So leading off, just a few words about the Digi ecosystem. When I refer to the ecosystem, I'm talking about our entire line of award-winning hardware. We've got the transport line of cellular routers, we've got gateway products, radio frequency products. We have a pretty broad array of embedded technologies. And the thing about having all these different technologies is you've got to have some way to engage them and extend them and monitor them when they've been put into service out in the field. And that's kind of where the Digi Remote Manager platform comes into play, because it's what allows you to kind of stay connected to your hardware, to manage and maintain the security on those devices, and to watch their performance and keep things working properly. So I'll talk just a little bit. Like I said, I am on the cellular side of the business. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about kind of the range of transport cellular routing models that we have available. We've really got models that cover just about any possible application. So if you're just needing a relatively simple connection, single Ethernet port, we've got the WR11 family in either a hardened or non-hardened version, depending on the temperature tolerances in the environment. If you're needing to move into greater cell carrier agility, so the ability to switch from one carrier to another or back up one carrier with a secondary carrier, then that's where you're going to move into the higher products like the WR21, 31, 44, and even now the latest LR54 product. Those products also incorporate serial ports. Some of them, like the WR31, also have input-output interfaces. So in that case, you've got a couple of digital and one analog interface as well. And of course, we've got very high temperature tolerances and good range of voltage support on these products as well. One of the big things that differentiates Digi products is the onboard Python programming environment. All of the Digi routers support this, and this allows you to vastly extend the capabilities of the routers without necessarily having to introduce an additional piece of hardware. So a lot of power, a good way to reach down into maybe sensors or something else that are attached, maybe a programmable logic controller that's attached to the Digi router, gather readings from it, and then send it along, whether it's to the remote manager platform or to a hosted back end of your own. Continuing on through the product line, the WR44 family of products are larger routers, and this model actually comes in 3 variants. There's a desk or rack mountable unit, as well as a vehicle mountable and even a rail mountable version. So the WR44RR is specifically designed for use on rail locomotives and for rail applications, so positive train control, things like that. If you have a vehicle-mounted application, such as a big truck or any kind of metro or light rail or anything, then the WR44R is a great option. Again, same types of capabilities with regard to serial and Python programming. These units also can handle more than one cell carrier and fail over from one to another. The WR44 also incorporates Wi-Fi capabilities, and you even have some configuration options. So if a customer is needing maybe additional serial capabilities on the router, then it can actually be requisitioned with that extra serial in place. So it's not really a user upgrade, but you do have some flexibility as to how you configure the unit from the factory. As I mentioned, we do have a brand new family of routers. The first one that's out in this new line is the LR54. It's a real workhorse, very heavily constructed. It does have a very robust firewall, similar to the other units. This unit, though, is all about speed. You'll notice one thing on this slide, which is LTE Advanced. So all of the other Digi routers are LTE routers, and they're comparable to the phones that most of you are probably holding right now. But the LTE Advanced capability means that they're able to take multiple slices, that this unit can take multiple slices of LTE cellular band, combine them, and generate extreme speed. So if you need a branch in a box, if you have digital sign applications, kiosk applications where maybe you're needing to push down video content, or you want to monitor camera setups and CCD intersections, traffic control, things like that, then the extreme speed of this unit is going to tend to be pretty beneficial. This model is also Wi-Fi capable. You can have dual band and dual concurrent Wi-Fi on it. So as I mentioned, we really wanted to kind of talk about Digi Remote Manager, and just the first thing I want to lead off with is what is it? Because a lot of people have heard of it, they have some vague idea, but I think in a lot of cases, at least based on my own conversations with customers, they tend to be a little surprised when they realize all the things that it can do. The reason that we actually created this platform is because we found that our customers all have comparable needs. They need to create, excuse me, secure router configurations. That's job one. If you're going to put any kind of hardware out in the field, especially cellular technologies, then number one, it's probably going to be somewhere away from where you are. So right there, you need to have a hook back into the unit. That's where Digi Remote Manager comes into play. So creating a secure configuration on a unit that you're not going to be directly in front of, and be able to keep hackers and bots and things out of your hardware, being able to ensure that security and make sure that the unit is remaining configured the way that you think it is. Enforcing security compliance. This is a big deal as well. We as Digi work with customers in every possible vertical, and a lot of the major verticals actually have industry-specific security specifications. We do find as we engage those customers that the requirements are often very similar, although the specifications are written pretty differently. But Remote Manager as a security platform is extremely useful in maintaining compliance with the industry-specific security specs. One of the big requirements of those specs is updating firmware, keeping your firmware fresh. Very, very frequently when new firmware comes out, it will tend to address some previously unknown or undetected security vulnerability, and so it is. And whether it's a little lightweight home monitoring camera or alarm system or anything like that, or you're into an enterprise-grade cellular router like the Digi hardware, keeping that firmware fresh is of paramount importance. The ability to securely get into your hardware once it has been deployed in the field is also critical, because I'm a former IT director myself, and if there's a universal truth out there, it is that you can configure, test, validate, vet your hardware until the cows come home, but as soon as you put it into service out in the field, for some reason, you're going to need to get back in and make some changes to those devices. It's just the way that it tends to work. There was some unanticipated situation or scenario, and somehow you're going to need to make a little tweak to those configs. So Remote Manager is great because rather than having to go and one by one individually address each one of those units, you can actually do it once, capture the deltas, and then import those changes across as many other units as you like. You can even do it after hours on a schedule if you want. And then finally, monitoring device health and connectivity. This is also a big deal, especially where cellular technologies are concerned. There are many elements that can come into play and affect your cellular performance for better or for worse. Your antennas, the orientation of the router, the orientation of the antennas, what other hardware is near your router, all these different things. What carrier are you using in a particular location? So all of these things can tend to come into play and have a pretty significant effect on the overall performance of your routers. And being able to monitor their health and connectivity is very significant in helping customers identify what may actually be in play and figure out the right questions to ask so that they can keep things working. So continuing on, what is Remote Manager? It is a platform that does all the things that I've been talking about. It's got device health monitoring built in. It enables compliance with all the major security specs. And we'll talk a little bit about the Remote Manager's profile management capability. Task automation, being able to schedule jobs, even jobs that include multiple steps like updating configuration, changing LAN IPs, updating firmware, and rebooting units. Those could be strung together in a single task if desired, and then set to run on a weekend or after midnight or sometime in off hours when the impact will be minimized for customers or end users. Finally, I did want to touch on the security of the platform itself. Remote Manager is most definitely the security platform for Digi hardware, but it is extremely secure in its own right. We've actually achieved ISO 27001 certification on this platform. And so we're not talking about just the way that we've architected the platform to be as robust and redundant as possible, hosting it in multiple data centers, extreme backups on all the databases, 24/7, 365, monitoring on the platform. We're also talking about Digi's internal protocols and procedures around who has what levels of access to the platform at what times and under what circumstances. So we take this kind of thing very seriously, so seriously in fact that we employ a chief security officer whose job it is to help us secure and maintain the security of Remote Manager. Just a few points about the platform. One, security and device management. all the things that I've been talking about, being able to stay in touch with your hardware, make configuration changes, update firmware, troubleshoot, all that stuff is a core function of the platform. But also, solution enablement is another cornerstone. What I mean by that is that there is a comprehensive API or application program interface that is part of Digi Remote Manager. And what that means is that if you want to use your Digi hardware to gather data from other devices that are maybe attached to it, so whether it's a bank of sensors or a programmable logic controller, or you're monitoring a specific device, maybe a smart device that simply needs a connection out, then it's possible to use Python program code, reach down into those devices, and pull the data into Remote Manager, and through the API, you could then access that data, render it in portals or other applications, and make it visible to end customers. So great deal of flexibility. One of the most powerful things is being able to actually trigger business process workflow in other systems based upon the data that's coming into Remote Manager from your devices. So extremely powerful, not only for device management and security, but also for solution enablement. So here's a quick slide on the capabilities architecture around the platform. So kind of similar to what I was just talking about a moment ago. Under device management, we have firmware updates, health monitoring, compliance with security, and then being able to manage your devices en masse. Solution enablement, again, the API, triggering business process, and simply providing a good application framework if you want to leverage the data in any other platform or system, such as a portal. But down at the bottom, you'll see kind of what the major pieces are of the platform. We collect data in the form of something we call data streams. We do have a full RESTful web services API that includes a push API. So you've got a couple of ways you can engage the data in the platform. One is you can reach out, query it, request some information, and then our system will respond. But we also have the ability for Remote Manager to push or forward all the data that's coming into it out to other systems. So it means that you can have literally up to the second performance regarding the triggering of other processes if you want to leverage Remote Manager in that way. We do have reporting capabilities as part of the platform also. So here are just a couple of sample graphs, the connection history of a device, the cellular signal and quality levels, a couple more, the data transmitted and received, as well as the packets that have been coming in and out of the platform as well. So a lot of different information that you can track. The reports that the platform offers can actually be customized to include or exclude what you consider most relevant. With regard to security compliance, I wanted to talk about the profile manager. One of the big things about complying with a security spec is that you have to configure your piece of hardware to satisfy a list of pretty stringent requirements, regulations. And the trick is, though, that if you have done all this configuration and placed a unit in service, once it's out there, you may not realize if someone has gone in and tampered with it. Perhaps it was an accident, it was an honest mistake. There's another universal truth around IT management, and that is that at some point, very, very capable, educated, and skilled IT staff are going to log in and make all the right changes to the wrong device. It happens. It happens every day. And a big part of the reason for that is that people tend to manage large numbers of the same models of hardware And very often they're doing it with nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet or some document that contains a list of MAC addresses and IP addresses. All it takes is your eyes jumping to the wrong line one time, and it's possible that you could get in and change the wrong device. Suddenly a whole section of the network has been brought down. So what Profile Manager will allow you to do is establish a master configuration for a particular group of devices. It might be 10 devices, it might be 10,000 devices, it really doesn't matter. You create the config on one particular unit, test it, make sure it's what you want, and then you can import that entire configuration into Remote Manager. From that point, you can then point that configuration toward as many other devices as you want and scan them at the interval that you specify. So maybe it's once a week, once a month, once every 6 months. It's really whatever is appropriate. Then if anything is detected at any point of the configuration of the target devices is detected to be out of compliance with the master config Profile Manager, then you can receive alarms from Remote Manager. You can, as an associated act, have emails sent out as well to create a bucket email address or send to multiple recipients, however you would like to handle it. And then finally, it's even at your option possible to have Profile Manager push the correct configuration back out onto that router. So any affected units could have their firmware updated and placed back to the level that it's supposed to be. They could have their configuration adjusted. They could even have their file system adjusted. So I mentioned Python capabilities. If the router is running some custom Python code, you want to make sure that the right program file is in place, and scanning the file system would help with that as well. The other half of this, though, is with Profile Manager, it's possible to actually create that master configuration and set devices to where the first time they attach to the platform, they can receive that proper configuration. So it's a great way to accelerate the provisioning of new devices and make sure that that they have all the settings they're supposed to have, that their firmware is at the right level, everything. It's just handled automatically if you set up the schedule. So again, around security compliance, I've kind of covered a lot of this. All the major security specs are satisfied by Digi Remote Manager, so PCI for payment card authorizations, NERC SIP for critical infrastructure such as the electrical grid or any kind of major infrastructure. HIPAA, we have transport routers that are actually health information from automated health testing scanners in use in clinics all over the world. In the U.S., that data is brought into the Centers for Disease Control so that they can track if a pandemic is beginning to develop. All of these are enabled by both Digi hardware and the hosted Digi Remote Manager platform. So I did want to talk just a little bit more about the mass configuration of units. The unit that you see in this particular image is an LR54, and there is one kind of key difference for this particular model. That is that there are 4 Ethernet ports on it, but one of them is a dedicated WAN port from the factory. So there are 3 LAN ports and 1 WAN. Now, if you don't want it to be a WAN port, that can be overridden, and you can make it into a local area network port instead. But what's great is that in using the automated provisioning feature that I was talking about with the Profile Manager and having a wired WAN port on the unit, this makes it easy to do your provisioning in the most automated possible manner and do so without consuming cellular data. So all you would need to do is plug an LR54 into a live LAN connection. The unit would receive an IP address from that connection through its own WAN connection, and then it would be able to receive a new profile as pushed out by Remote Manager. So it really can help accelerate and automate the process even more. So I did want to go in and spend just a very few minutes doing a quick live demo. I can't make you an expert on Remote Manager today, but I did want to talk about a handful of key things. One is enabling remote management on a device. With the Transport WR family, remote management is not enabled from the factory. There are a number of reasons that it's been handled that way for a long time, but just suffice it to say that it is not enabled from the factory. So if a customer is going to be deploying Digi hardware from the Transport WR line, then they will need to go in and enable that feature. Again, if it could be that it's just the one piece that gets enabled, and they could circulate that basic config across all their units, and then they would all be on by default before they're deployed. But you do want to give that some consideration, because if you deploy the hardware and have not enabled remote management, then it is a little trickier to get it turned on later if you decide to begin using Remote Manager. I want to talk about adding devices to the platform. It's not a difficult process. You've got a couple of different ways that it can be done, but I'll kind of show you that. We'll take a quick look at kind of how the configuration interface can look for a device. Again, I'll be showing transport routers, but this could apply just as well to the Digi RF gateway family and the Zigbee and XD capable hardware as well. We'll take a quick look at schedules, and then finally we'll look at the profile manager. So let me go ahead and bring up my screen. So the first thing we're looking at, this happens to be a Transport WR31. But it's really going to look the same on pretty much any of the Transport WR family of routers. If you go to Home, Configuration, Remote Management, you'll see right here, and then finally Remote Manager. When you fan that down, it's this top checkbox that you're going to need to turn on. So it's going to look like this from the factory. When you turn it on, it should pop up and show everything checked as you see. You won't need to put any kind of password here. Just leave all that stuff. Leave everything as you see it. And then you would apply and save your changes. So if you don't know anything about transport routers, it is important to understand that anytime you make a change, you're going to want to apply and then save the configuration. And that's kind of a safety net. When you're dealing with an enterprise-grade router, I can tell you that it is possible to lock yourself out of the unit. And so what we've done is give you kind of a two-step process, so that if you hit apply and the change goes into instant effect and you can no longer access the router, then by unplugging it, it would go back to the way it had been before. If you apply it and the change is good, then you can save it and it will not be lost the next time the unit is restarted. The other thing I wanted to mention while I'm here is you can also enable health metrics under, sorry, give me one moment. You can also enable health metrics under the same configuration area. So if I go into Remote Manager and then Health Metrics, then this is where you would simply check the boxes to enable health metrics for the Ethernet, the mobile, and the overall system interfaces. And you can also adjust the upload and collection intervals for that information. So let me kind of switch gears then, and we'll take a quick look at my Digi Remote Manager account. So when you first log in, if you have health management enabled, then you're going to see a quick device health dashboard. And this is going to give you a good overview of kind of what's going on with your unit. So you can come over and see if you have any type of health alarms that have triggered in the system, any profile-related alarms. So I've found a couple of units have been have been discovered that are not in compliance with the master config. I can scroll down and see how many devices I currently have connected, how many are currently disconnected on my platform, and if I'm using the push monitor to forward data to any other location, then I can see the status of that. Is my monitor working okay? And it's actually possible to kind of tweak the device health dashboard to show or trigger based upon the stats that you find most important for your hardware. So don't worry that you're going to be locked into Digi's way of doing it. There will be a lot of latitude for you around that. When we go into the device management area, this is where you're going to actually be able to see the full list of all the devices you have. So I'm under Device Management and Devices as the sub-tab, and I want to point out a couple of things right away. First is over on the left, you'll see that I've actually created some organizational groups. So these are logical groups that help you arrange your Digi hardware. And again, it could be XP hardware. It really doesn't matter. We support the bulk of what Digi manufactures as far as security and management in this platform. But by creating these groupings, it can really take the edge off engaging the units that you think you're going to engage. When you've got large numbers of units, and we have customers that literally purchase thousands of the exact same model, and in most of those cases, they're configured identically. And so they've got a very common use case. They put them all out into service, and they just want them to keep running. So if they wanted to name these groups in a way that were specific to the application that the routers are handling, or to the geographic location of the equipment, or the business unit, it could be any number of different things. You can also nest groups within groups within groups. So further and further compartmentalize things to keep them organized as much as possible. The other thing is that we support the use of custom user metadata and custom tags on our units. So this can be very beneficial as far as filtering the list. If you're in here and you've got hundreds of units and you really just need to zero in to filter the list on one particular model, or one unit, or the units that are serving a particular purpose, then you can simply apply a filter tag, and any of them that contain that information, the list is going to be filtered so that you can immediately zero in on those. So it just makes it a lot easier to get organized and stay organized. Now, anytime you need to add a device to the platform, it's really pretty straightforward. Probably the most immediate and obvious way to do this is by clicking Add Devices. And you've got a couple of different options. One is you can use the MAC address, and that's the default. So if you have the MAC address for the Digi router, which presumably you will receive as part of your purchasing process, you can just put that MAC address and click Add, and you should see the unit listed here. At that point, you hit OK, and the router should be added to, or gateway should be added to your account. You do also have Digi Device ID that you can use. So the device ID is actually extrapolated from the MAC address. So if you ever really analyze a device ID, once you start playing with the platform, then you would see that it actually contains the same numbers, but there are a lot more digits in the equation. IMEI is a cellular identification number, and it is not something that you're going to be able to use to provision a Digi cellular gateway or a transport router. What you would use IMEI for is if you're adding something like a Digi Connect tank or a Connect sensor. These are specialty devices that Digi manufactures to allow customers to use battery-operated hardware and monitor the levels of a product in a tank, or maybe attached to a variety of sensors performing a particular task out in the field. So very different type of device, and that's really the only time you would use IMEI for adding. If you want, if you have a very large number of devices, I guess my big piece of advice would be get in touch with Deb at Digi. Deb can always find me no matter how much I try to hide. And I've actually got a utility that will allow you to rapidly import as many as hundreds of Digi devices in one motion. So put together this little utility. You start with a spreadsheet of MAC addresses for all the devices that you've purchased, and then you can pre-populate it with any additional information such as groups that you might want them assigned to. Even if the groups don't exist yet, it will create them for you. It can pre-assign things like metadata, tags. It can even pre-assign coordinates. So if you want to display the location of hardware on the included map, so you may have noticed I'm in Texas, down on the Gulf Coast in the Houston area, then it is possible to pre-assign GPS coordinates and all of that as well if you're buying units that don't have their own GPS built in. So I want to, you know what? Let me go back 1 second. The one thing that I did want to take a quick look at is the configuration interface. So you can pick any unit when you're working in Remote Manager and go in and have direct access to a configuration interface for that unit. So in this case, DHCP is how you would assign IP addresses to network devices that are plugged into the Ethernet ports on your router. Maybe I've got an address pool size of 10, and instead I'd like to change it to 20. Well, you may have noticed as soon as I type that, I got a save button. So if I were to hit save, this change would immediately go into effect on this router. But something that I really like a lot is that I have the ability to export from the router as well. So if I want to export the entire configuration, everything but just the network and identity properties, I can do that. Or I can export just the deltas, the changes that I've just made. And then I can save those changes and import them into other units later using the scheduler. So speaking of the scheduler, this is a place where it's possible to build a job that will do just about anything you want. So we were talking about importing a configuration. So if I wanted to build a task that does that, it would just be a matter of adding the step, import config. If I want to do anything else, maybe add a reboot in there, then I could do that. If I want to drag the steps and change the order of them, then I can do that as well. And if there's anything that I want to remove from my task, then I can do that as well. So any of you old-timers, if you remember batch files from the old days where you could kind of string together commands and automate complicated tasks, in a sense, that's kind of how schedules work. But the great thing about them is that they can then be pointed to as many other devices as you want. So if you have a large number of devices, or if you want to point them toward a named organizational group or devices that only contain certain tags, then you can do that. At any point, you can get back in and edit. So in this particular task, I'm actually sending out a command that queries GPS coordinates for one of my routers, and anywhere that router goes, it's going to update its view on the map within Remote Manager. So just a very easy, quick way to automate that. If you have cellular customers who have maybe a management account through maybe AT&T's Jasper, or if they're using Verizon's management console, we support one or two of the Canadian providers as well, then it is possible to integrate those platforms directly into Remote Manager. So a good way to kind of know what's going on, how much data is being used by devices according to the carrier. So you don't have to necessarily go into multiple places to get all that info. The last thing I wanted to spend just a minute or two on is the Profile Manager. We talked about this a little while ago. This is where you're able to establish that master config and point it to any of the units that you want to cover. So whether it's by the group that they're assigned to or a tag that they contain or anything like that, or if you just want to individually select the routers, then you can point that configuration to them and have them scan. When it comes to what we're going to scan, you've got some flexibility there as well. We do recommend that you scan all three elements, so firmware, configuration, and the file system, but it is at your option. In this case, I'm only scanning the config. And probably the best thing of all is we do hear from time to time, a customer says, well, you know, we want the configs to be identical, but we've got a unique LAN IP assigned to the onboard Ethernet interface or something like that. So in those instances, you can actually have those values ignored. So if a profile were pushed out to a unit, it would not end up overwriting those key values. So you've got an extreme amount of granularity as far as exactly how you scan your units and make a determination about whether any action should be taken. Once you've set that schedule, you do have options. Do you want to see a device profile alarm? If you've set it up under the admin area, then that would also include email alerts. And then optionally, you can have Remote Manager push the entire configuration out onto your devices. So a great deal of power. Use it cautiously, but use it to your advantage because it's extremely beneficial and can really help you automate your work. At this point, I'm going to switch gears, hand things over to Deb Smith. Deb wants to talk just a little bit about a special promotion that Digi has going on. Go ahead, Deb.
Thank you, Randall. So before we get to the questions portion of today's webinar, I do want to share an exclusive offer and promotion to the audience. Randall, if you can forward the screen, please. With all the features and benefits that Digi Remote Manager offers, I'm sure you would like to know how you can get started using it. Express is a longtime valued partner with Digi and is likely the provider of your Digi Cellular router purchases. As an exclusive offer only to them, and for attending this webinar, you can try Digi Remote Manager free for a 6-month trial period. The offer is in effect for 60 days, and we're running that through March 31st, 2017. Reach out to your Express team, Tom, Bob, or Joe, and get signed up today and start communicating to your remote Digi devices. From Express and Digi, we thank you for attending the webinar today and look forward to working with you. I'll turn it back over to our moderator, Tracy, for the question portion of our webinar.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Randall, for the informative presentation as well. Remote participants, as a reminder, please enter your questions into the GoToWebinar sidebar on the right of your screen, and we will get them addressed. First question, how long has Digi had this platform available?
Okay, good question. So Digi has offered remote management for about 14 years at this point. The current iteration of this platform has been up and running now for, I think, about 5 or 6 years. We kind of changed our architecture pretty significantly around that time and went to the extreme scaling and redundancy that we have now. So we are definitely not new to the security platform game, and I think you'll take from our ISO certification. This, believe me, is not something that anyone comes into lightly. To achieve an ISO certification is a considerable commendation for our platform. It underscores the $30 million we've invested in this system, and just suffice it to say that this is not just a PC sitting under someone's desk. This is very, very robust and secure platform.
Thank you. Next question. How is Digi Remote Manager sold?
I can take that one. So as I mentioned, Digi Remote Manager is a platform that is resold through Express, so go back through them. The options that we offer, however, standardly are a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-year plan. And as you commit to a longer plan, the prices go down. So you can do any one of those commitments, and it's a one-time fee that's charged for that yearly commitment.
Thank you. Randall, you may have touched on this, but how is Digi Remote Manager used in a private network?
Okay, that's an excellent question, and I'm glad somebody asked because I did not touch on it, and I should have. So we do have this situation from on a pretty frequent basis where especially our cellular customers are using a completely private networking scenario. They're using something we call a private APN that essentially is architected in a way that has the cell carrier making a VPN connection to the customer, and then the carrier provides SIM cards that give private IP addresses that will work within the customer's network. But the rub is that there's no external data traffic allowed under that particular architecture. So since Remote Manager is a hosted platform, how can the customer then attach their cellular hardware to Remote Manager and use it to manage their devices? So there are really kind of three major options. I'll start with the one that everyone hates. It's actually very easy and very fast, but nobody ever wants to do it, and that is modifying a corporate firewall rule at the customer site to allow traffic out to one particular IP address and one port. It's very quick. It's a quick rule change. It's very simple, and it works great, and nobody wants to do it per security policy. They're always afraid that somehow or another it's going to expose a vulnerability in their own network. So I don't think that we at Digi agree on that point, but it is commonly rejected by customers, I can say from experience. So a second and very palatable option for many of our customers is often corporate customers are using a web proxy within their network. And so they've got a proxy server where they can whitelist or blacklist different types of traffic. It's a similar approach to the firewall, but there's a great deal of logging and monitoring that can go on with it. And so since you can configure web proxies on board Digi routers, then it's possible to route their traffic through an internal web proxy, whitelist the one IP address and one port that are required for Remote Manager, and then you're good to go. The third option, and rapidly becoming one of our most popular options, is a VPN connection between the customer's network operations center and Digi's platform operations center for Remote Manager. So what you end up with is a secure IPsec VPN tunnel between the customer site and Digi, where the customer would only allow the routers that have that range of IP addresses provided, the private IPs provided by the cell carrier, to come in and then go through that tunnel, ultimately to access Remote Manager on the Digi side. This is important to understand that the connection that's made from the transport router back to Remote Manager is indeed a device-initiated connection. The device phones in. So Remote Manager isn't just sending massive blasts of signals out all over the world to try and find any routers that might respond. It's exactly the opposite. All the routers are going to know where Remote Manager is. They'll know how to contact it. So what you've got to do is come up with some way or another to allow that traffic to occur. So firewall, web proxy, or VPN are your big three options, and of course there are variants on some of those, but those are the major ways to achieve this in private IP scenarios. Other than that, as long as the router has access to the internet, then it will be able to attach to Remote Manager.
Thank you. Remote participants, just a reminder that if you have any questions, please enter them in the GoToWebinar sidebar on the right side of your screen. I have one more question at this time. How do I add devices as my network grows?
I can take that one, Randall. So as I mentioned previously, you want to go back through Express for this. And as I also mentioned previously, we sell the Digi Remote Manager in 5 different year variables. So as you want to add devices, and you already got devices on the platform, what you want to do is reach out to them, and they will get you a prorated quote to add those devices in whatever month it is. Therefore, by doing this, all of the devices will end at the same time. And so you definitely want to go back through them to get that handled.
Thank you. I don't see any further. Did you have something, Randall?
Yeah, Tracy, actually, I have a question that that I kind of expected might have been asked, but I haven't heard, so I thought I would cover it. We have situations that pop up periodically where a customer is a managed service provider for their customers. So they may provide equipment to their end user, end customer population, and they want to allow those end users, end customers to log into Remote Manager and maybe see their devices, but then the managed service provider also needs to have access, but they can't have one customer seeing another customer's devices. So how do they deal with that? And the answer is that Digi Remote Manager now supports master and sub accounts. So as a managed service provider, that customer would be able to be the master account holder, and then for each of their end customers, they would be able to have a sub-account. Each customer would be able to see their equipment, interact with it, but the master account would allow the service provider to get into all of the devices on any of their end customer accounts and manage them in a very, very similar way. So this is a relatively new feature. It's a big deal. It was kind of a long time coming, so I thought I would mention it while we're on today.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions at this time. Randall and Deb, thank you for your time today. Attendees, please remember, if you have a question after the webinar has concluded, feel free to email them to global.channel.calendar@digi.com. Also, a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording will be emailed out to you shortly. At this time, I will conclude the session, and we hope you have a great day. Thank you.